Welcome one, welcome all. We are the fairest of them all. It is the NFC's Mixtape, the greatest podcast ever produced in the history of not just SB Nation, the world. You can listen to this podcast at Blog of the Boys, SB Nation's home for Dallas Cowboys content, Bleeding Green Nation, SB Nation's home for Philadelphia Eagles content, Hogs Haven, SB Nation's home for Washington Commanders content, and Big Blue View, SB Nation's home for New York Giants content. You can also watch us on the Blog of the Boys YouTube channel. You can also watch us on the Bleeding Green Nation YouTube channel. I am RJ Ochoa from Blog of the Boys. He is Brandon Lee Gowton, apparently from the Himalayas, at least the way he's dressed today.
For those who can't see, I'm wearing a coat and a hat. I'm feeling, just like I need to kind of hide something, RJ, hide something from you. And so maybe I should just take this off and unveil a Kelly
Unveil?
Green.
The word is unveil.
Unveil, whatever. Don't ruin the day. Unveil. Also going to switch over the Phillies hat, which I'm realizing now I have to take my headphones kind of off.
This is super awkward for the podcast audience. Mm-hmm.
People have been looking forward to this podcast, RJ, since the first night of the 2022 NFL draft, because it was a very...
What are you wearing? Like, you didn't even show us or anything. You're just like an Eagles hoodie?
Hat. It's an Eagles hoodie.
Is that from Homage, by the way?
It is. Shout out.
Shout out to our friends at Homage who hooked us up at SB Nation. I bought some shirts there as well, so street goes both ways. Are you really proud of yourself? Like I'm
official stance from the NFC East Mixtape. The Eagles are back.
Oh my god! Wow. Wow. We have a lot to get to. Obviously, we're going to review all four draft classes from throughout the NFC East, and maybe do our best to impact the hubris that has taken hold among our friends at Bleeding Green Nation. I had one confession to make to you, Brandon, before we started the show, if you're all right with that.
Let's hear it.
I tweeted about this, so you might have seen that.
No.
But on Monday, we had some stuff going on, and I had to take the dog to the groomer, so I picked up food for my wife and I. But we did the smart thing. We ordered lunch and enough for dinner. You know what I mean? So, two birds, one stone sort of thing. And we ordered from like a seafood place, but kind of like a Cajun seafood place. I don't know if you've ever been to Papados. It's like a Houston chain that is percolated all throughout Texas.
I've not been to a Houston chain, no.
Well, anyway, I don't know. Maybe an airport or something. You never know. Anyway, I had etouffee for the first time in my life. It was crawfish etouffee. I had never really had that. Somebody asked me why. A friend texted and they were like, "How's this possible?" I said, "Well, anytime I've been to a Cajun place, I've always just kind of known what I wanted to eat. I'm not the most adventurous eater. I'm not opposed to it, but I like what I like. So I attacked it with ferocity, and holy crap, I was missing out. So it's pretty good.
Efouté, etu, brute.
I'm so sad right now. This is the worst episode that we've ever done. So
you're sad because of
there was the unveil and veal, mishap, and now this. Let's go ahead and get started. Our YouTube audience is in store because we do have all four draft classes up and available for you as soon as it loads. There it goes. Brandon, we have to go obviously in order of divisional standing, which is the way they are listed here. I don't make the rules. We made the rules together. It's a democracy after all.
Should we though? Because here's my, all right. I agree we usually have to do that, but I feel like it might make more sense in the context of the draft to talk about what chronologically happened.
I think we're going to get way off, but I guess we might as well.
Because if we're talking about what the Cowboys did already at 24, I just think there's a lot of context that's already being missed in the conversation.
Sure. Okay, then let's talk about the New York maybe back at football Giants. They land Kayvon Thibodeau at 5 overall. And then land Evan Neal at 7 overall for their 2 first-round selections. So a couple of things, Brandon. The Giants did not walk away with a first-round pick in 2023, which we thought might happen. We speculated. We were worried about. We talked to Ed about this on the Quadcast here on the Mixtape. And I don't know if I ever vocalized this, but it was definitely a thought in my head. If they did not trade out, because that was my worst fear, was they were going to pick up future draft capital in the first round, obviously. This was my worst case scenario, coming from a Cowboys perspective. They did not have to move. They got 2 awesome cornerstone foundational players in the trenches. It's a pretty big bummer to have competent adults running that team for the first time in a while.
I am glad that they didn't get a feature first. I was on the record prior to the draft saying that was the worst
I think that's the only way this could have been worse, to be clear.
Right, yes. So that's not to say they did a bad job. I'm just saying that would have been the very worst case scenario, is getting like either one of Thibodeau and Neal and that 2023 first round pick and maybe even more. So I'm glad they didn't get that. But the players they got are absolutely worthwhile players for them. I think I said it to Stats on the Oddcast today. I think you can make a case that in like a given year, especially where quarterbacks aren't strong, these could be number one overall picks. Like they're that kind of those kind of prospects. We saw Evan Neal and Kayvon Thibodeau at times leading up to this year's draft as like the number one overall pick.
Well, Evan Neal was the number one overall player on many boards. And so yeah, it sucks. And there's an argument that Kayvon Thibodeau is the best pass rusher in the class, and there's an argument that he's at worst the second best pass rusher. I said this on Monday Football Monday with Pete Sweeney. I can't remember a year, and this isn't an AFC South mixtape, but where like the number one overall pick has generated like fewer like amounts of juice. Like nobody cares. Like everybody's like,
even
whatever.
his name, like just like it's like a very generic name, like Trayvon Walker. You know what I mean? It's not like Kayvon Thibodeau is a cool name. Like, oh wow, that guy's like.
It's like
no juice at all.
It's fun to spell. Like there's a Y and a V in there, and there's an X.
Nickname, you can call him Tibbs, whatever. Like, there's no juice.
He's so charming, and that has nothing to do with like who they're going to be as football players, but like every interview he did, he was awesome. He was so cool. He was so much fun. He was on the Around the NFL podcast. A lot of people heard that. He was just, I mean, again, huge bummer. I think that they had the better first round of the New York teams. I know everybody's like falling in love with the Jets. I don't think, and I also mentioned this on Monday Football Monday, people are penalizing the Jets enough for trading up to draft Breece Hall. That made no sense to me. I mean, it makes some sense, but it didn't make a lot of sense to me. But overall, as we get the class back up here for the YouTube audience, I mean, it was kind of like a, fireworks at the beginning, and then maybe not a fizzling out, but a general kind of like chilling out for the Giants draft class. I loved the Joshua Uzudu pick. We took him a lot in like the 5th round, a lot of mocks that we did. Some guard tackle flexibility there. A lot of people agree that they reached on Wan'Dale Robinson. They did not move Kadarius Toney, which a lot of people thought would happen throughout the draft. But overall, this smells like a class that is the first step in a long line of improvement. And I don't think, I think this makes them better, but I don't know that I kind of joked that they would win the division. They're turning the corner, and that sucks to see.
I do think there is some downside with Thibodeau. Like, I don't think we can just totally say all the red flags are total bunk and came out of nowhere. Like, there was enough out there to kind of make me wonder if there is a reason he kind of fell a little bit just because, and just beyond other teams kind of being dumb or whatever. So I'm kind of like, I think it has the potential to work out, but there's downside too. I don't think it's a no-brainer. Whereas Evan Neal to me is more of like just total upside. There isn't really a lot of downside there to me. So I would make that distinction. Although I think you have to acknowledge how the Giants worked it out was very smart in terms of they took Thibodeau there because they realized that like
what the Panthers were going to do.
Yeah, if they took the tackle first, they might lose out on him with a team potentially trading up to 6. And that might seem like common sense or obvious, but that's not something Dave Gettleman would probably do. Like, he would probably mess that up. So the fact that like they have a GM now, like you said, like adults in the room who can kind of at least get those things right is a big deal. I agree with you. I think Robinson, a lot of people just based on like consensus, big board and whatnot, thought he might have been a reach, but a lot of people like the player. So maybe even if the value isn't right, it's still kind of an intriguing player for them. I'll throw in Daniel Bellinger, someone I had mocked to the Eagles, a tight end from San Diego State. He was actually the second most athletic tight end in terms of relative athletic score in this class. Didn't post big numbers in college receiving, but I think there's some untapped potential there. Giants haven't had a good tight end in a long time.
Who was the last good one?
I mean, Evan Ingram had flashes, but he's always hurt and inconsistency and drops. So
I always forget who was the other tight end man.
Jeremy Shockey wasn't actually good.
Obviously,
Kevin Boss wasn't actually good. They had fake good tight ends.
Who am I thinking of? Larry O'Donnell. That's not the name.
Larry Donnell is his name.
Is that what it was?
He was big guy. Yeah.
I've told this story before, but there was a Thursday night game, I think in 2013, and I happened to be playing against my dad that week in our fantasy football league of record, and New York was at Washington on this Thursday night, and I had Larry Donnell. I remember talking to him on the phone before that game. I was like, yeah, just watch. Larry Donnell's going to catch like 3 touchdowns tonight, because I had him going. Sure enough, he caught 3 touchdowns. Like, I will never forget that moment. So that was pretty sick. But the Darian Beavers pick at the very end, that was, we did live shows all throughout the draft at Blogging the Boys. We wanted him like basically all of day 3. So pretty good value there. Overall, again, Solid. And I think your point about like sticking and making the right pick and just like the common sense thing is common sense, but it's not common throughout the NFL. I look at the draft that the Vikings had or the Bears had, like other new general managers, like those were terrible. Like those are examples of how people who haven't done this a lot can overthink or outthink themselves. And I think that happened in Minnesota and Chicago.
Yeah, I think one of the things I thought was interesting that I read on Big Blue View as I'm looking it up here was Ed kind of mentioned that uh, uh, Big Blue View's own Chris Plum, who does a bunch of draft work for them, wrote up 100 or so prospect profiles, which good work by Chris here, pretty impressive. But none of those players who he had profiled out of the 100 were taken after day one. So the exact line he used was like, "I'm wondering if Joe Shane and I looked at the same player pool." So take that for what it's worth. But so I think it's all. I think the point there is it was really all about day one for the Giants, and getting those players at 5 and 7 is huge. For all the bad that Dave Gettleman did, his one and only ever trade down was an amazing trade down. Like everyone thought the Giants should have just taken Justin Fields. No way. Like I mean. The jury is very much out on him, and the value they got back in return is very good.
He truly, like Black Widow in Avengers, like sacrificed himself. You know what I mean? Like for the good of humanity, which is Giants fans here. I will say we haven't mentioned. I guess we're kind of going in reverse order here. I guess we'll do the Commanders next, but
we're going in draft order.
But the day of the draft, the New York Giants declined, or rather said that they were not going to pick up, whatever, same thing, the 5th-year option on Daniel Jones. We kind of thought they would, just because it makes sense. And I hate the, public spin that's like, well, this is actually a good thing for Daniel Jones because if he plays really well, then he's going to make a lot more money. Yeah, but it also says that they think he sucks. So I know what I've said about Kyler Murray before. That's definitely a factor. But I think it's very, very likely that the future quarterback of the New York Giants in 2023 and beyond is not Daniel Jones.
Sure. And he gets a chance this year to show if he's got anything. Giants didn't draft a quarterback when they easily could have. They could have taken a shot on Malik Willis or Matt Corral or whoever else, and they didn't. So that's very much remains to be seen. And the Giants still have a lot of work to do. Again, it's not like, hey, they're a finished product. And I think it's insane that you think they're winning the NFC East this year, which I heard you kind of go against on another podcast. I felt like maybe the look ahead that you didn't.
I got a little into the moment, on the podcast.
Yeah, okay.
It's obviously the Cowboys. I mean, to be clear. Okay,
yeah, really.
Let's spin to the Commanders, whose most recent NFC East titles really shouldn't count because they were years that Cowboys quarterbacks were hurt for the majority of the season. The Commanders traded back. I'm going to be honest, I trusted that you had the list, the sequence of the pick and how it traveled from team to team to team to team. Because Washington traded back with New Orleans, and that was part of the Philly trade and the Eagles trade. The Colts trade. Do you happen to have that sequence?
Well, so 15, where the Eagles were supposed to pick in this draft, and their original highest pick was from Miami.
Right.
16 was
which started off from San Francisco, correct? Originally.
No,
that was Miami's original pick because they gave that up. Gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
Miami had the choice of really giving up their pick or the 49ers pick.
So the pick started with Miami, became Phillies.
Phillies.
Right, in the Jalen Waddle trade from a year ago.
So that's why the Eagles had that one. And they also had 16 prior to the Saints trade because they got that from the Colts in the Carson Wentz deal, which was obviously not even guaranteed to be a first at first. It was a conditional second that could turn into a first. It did, sure enough. Carson Wentz didn't even last beyond the season in Indy.
We have some Carson takes to get off here relative to the draft class, but keep going.
He was traded to Washington. And so was this pick at number 16 that was moved to the Saints, from the Eagles to the Saints. It was the Saints' first of their first two selections in this year's draft. The Saints wanted to move up to the number 11 spot, and just an insane trade. And I touched on that in the podcast with stats about how the Saints are some of the biggest losers of the draft, making this.
Yeah, the whole process was not worth it. But
listen to there's a whole breakdown on why that's so insane, especially.
Okay, so to get us back on track, the pick transferred hands.
I'm getting there. So. The Washington Commanders traded down from number 11, so to 16. So the pick that the Eagles got for Carson Wentz was sent to the Saints, and then that pick was then sent to Washington, who Washington now has Carson Wentz as their quarterback.
So because you said that in a very confusing way. The pick that Washington ultimately used to select Jahan Dotson.
Yes. Was the pick
originally
traded to the Eagles.
Like moved around as many times as it did because it did not belong to Indianapolis because they gave it up for Carson Wentz.
The pick that was traded for Carson Wentz. The Colts used this pick to trade for Carson Wentz, ended up being used by the team that now has Carson Wentz as their quarterback.
That is amazing. Like, the theater of that is incredible.
You love that stuff, but to me, I don't know. Whatever.
If I had been the Colts, I would have vomited in anger. Like, I would have been so upset that team got to execute that pick. You know what I mean? Like, it would have been frustrating to watch anybody pick there. Let alone if it had been Philly, if it had been New Orleans after the trade, whatever. But the fact that it was the fact that Carson gets to benefit, in a literal sense, from that pick would have just filled me with rage if I had been, Chris Ballard. But if I was Chris Ballard, I would be devoid of the ability for accountability, so I maybe wouldn't feel that way. But anyway, let's
just mess up and then do something else, and everyone would talk about how great the next thing was. And
seriously, Chris Ballard could take 5 steps backwards and then 1 forward, and the whole NFL world would be
it was a great step.
Holy crap, he moved forward. Everybody throw bouquets of roses at Chris Ballard's feet. The whole Washington Commanders draft class. Again, the Jahan Dotson thing is fine. He was somebody actually in Daniel Jeremiah's final mock draft the night before the draft. He mocked Dotson to the Cowboys at what would have been 24 overall. But the receiver run obviously happened, and so Dotson goes to Washington. I like this. I mean, I do think this is smart. We've said this in the entire run-up, You've made this Carson bed, lie in it. You know what I mean? Lie in it, fluff up the pillows, get a comfy blanket, turn something on the TV and enjoy it. Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin, you could do a lot worse, obviously, as a wide receiver duo. Other than that, though, not a lot to really kind of write home about. Their whole class outside of that was a little bit suspect.
I don't agree that Jahan Dotson was the best way they could have went about this. I'd rather just have Jameson Williams, honestly, at number 11. I don't think...
that I agree with. I'm talking about in a vacuum, but you're right. The trade down was not really worth it.
If you're going to take Dotson, fine. It's with the trade down. It's a better way to do it, yes, as opposed to just taking him at 11. But I just think J-Mo was the clear best receiver in this draft. And I think they should have went that direction. Also, maybe, I don't know, maybe the Lions didn't want to come up to 11, but if you don't like Jameson Williams, maybe try harder to get that package from the Lions. Mm-hmm. The Saints deal wasn't bad for Washington by any means, but I don't think that was the best move for them. I think they should have stayed at 11, take Jameson Williams. Again, this isn't just hindsight or me saying this is what I said in the quadcast. I said Jameson Williams would scare me the most if Washington got him. So they didn't. I think Dotson might be fine. I know a lot of Penn State people who like him, which obviously they're biased, but
if you're a Penn State fan, by the way, and an Eagles fan, and obviously there's a lot of those, you've now got Jahan Dotson in Washington, Micah Parsons in Dallas, and Saquon in New York. It is a team.
in Philly.
What I mean, who That's was one. I don't know if you know this. He backed up Saquon. So
wow.
This class is kind of underwhelming. It's one of the only things that made me feel a little bit better about Dallas's class. But the Sam Howell pick is the one that kind of generated a lot of other conversation. And it makes sense, right? And we talked about this on our live show. I mean, a year ago, people thought he would be the number 1 overall pick, right? I love that idea. I love in a vacuum, hey, this dude, a lot of people really believed in. Maybe there's something there. Maybe you trust your scouts and your personnel to develop him, etc. But to be clear, I don't think that anyone should cater to Carson Wentz. But if anyone is incapable of handling even the slightest amount of pressure from that kind of direction, it's him. And so I think it's amazing that 2 different teams, really 3 different teams, and this is the one area where I'll kind of make up for Wentz. Again, his fragile ego is not a good thing that should be defended, but it has been known that it existed, and the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts in spite of it. The Colts drafted Sam Bellinger, which isn't a big deal, but to Carson Wentz it is. And it's now the Commanders, everywhere he's been, they've drafted quarterbacks.
The last 3 years. Yeah.
I will say that he's probably thinking dude, I've made a huge public facade about how I don't like this. Quit doing it to me.
it has more than 0% to do with him. Absolutely. Like, you can't say like it's just a coincidence. No, it has at some level something to do with Carson Wentz in terms of not believing in him 100% long term. Also, potential availability issues. Obviously, last year, especially with COVID, but now, well, just with injuries and whatnot. So it's a fine, it's a 5th round pick. So whatever. I think Sam Howell does suck. Like, I remember watching him early in this season because there was buzz. He could be a top quarterback, and the Eagles potentially, were going to be in the market.
The Eagles are terrible. They need a quarterback, right? Gotcha.
So I was watching him, and I was like, all right, let's see. And I was just like, the first game, I was out. I was like, this guy stinks. Like, this guy is not a good player. So I think it's kind of a waste of time, and just that I don't believe in the player. But in terms of the resources, it's like a why not. Heineke is going to be a free agent, I believe, after this year. Carson Wentz could very feasibly be gone after one season. So why not take another quarterback just to have there? And have in house, but yeah, it doesn't really move the needle. Probably will make no impact, but whatever. It's there. You took a chance on day 3. It's fine.
Commanders are whatever. They're the most whatever team.
We want to give the Giants as a grade, and Commanders, we should probably grade these.
I think Giants is a solid A. If you want to bump it down to an A minus, you want to take some shine away.
Yeah,
I love it, but because I think you have to grade like relative to expectation and relative to context, like relative to who they are and where the franchise is at. So I think it's an A, like it's the right direction. So good for them. Commanders, C plus, B minus. I mean, depending on what mood you're in, like, does it move the needle? Like, at least the Giants, and again, if they win the division, let's just remember that I predicted it. But they do seem like they are aware, right? Like, they're like, look, like, we're not winning the division. Like, we got to figure out this Daniel Jones thing, whatever. Like, but in the process, we can, build things up the right way so that when we get to the place that we want to be at, we're ready to roll. I have no idea what Washington's doing. Like, they're so stagnant. They won't pay Terry McLaurin. They're trading for Carson Wentz, which exemplifies this like kind of win now proposition. Like, they have their hands in multiple cookie jars, and I'm not on board with that. I'm not on board with Ron Rivera. So that's why, like, it's hard to identify the direction they're going in. So C plus for me.
A minus for me from the Giants. I just don't really sort of love. I'm not really thrilled, jazzed about anything they did outside of day 1 so much. And then Washington, I'm just going to give them a straight up C. I don't think there's anything like super intriguing about this class at all. It's an average draft class. It wasn't terrible. I think they could have done a lot worse. The trade down, I thought, was a reasonable move for them in a vacuum, but they should have just taken Jameson Williams. If they got him, I would have given it at least a B minus. So yeah, it's just fine. It's more the same in Washington. Kind of just, they're fine. They're
status quo.
For as much as a dumpster fire they are, a lot of their moves are kind of just like fine. Like, they're not like, oh my gosh, this move is incredibly dumb.
If they were the Lions, I think they'd be regarded as like somewhat successful. But because they carry the burden of the organization, it's like trash. You know what I mean? So I agree with that. Okay, ready to move on to the loser Eagles. Ready?
Move on to the Eagles, who were supposed to pick at 15, but at number 13, they traded up to take Jordan Davis, who's exactly who I wanted them to take, RJ. I said that leading up to the draft. He was basically my Devontae Smith from last year. Now, so was Jameson Williams. Sure. I wanted both.
You can't have two, by the way.
I can. If the Eagles had 2 first-round picks, I wanted them to get both. It's 1A, 1B, honestly, for me. I'd lean with Jameson Williams. He's the wide receiver. It's more fun. But guess what? They couldn't get Jameson Williams. He was off the board before they could. The Lions traded up there. So next best thing, Jordan Davis. Too many people are overthinking this, RJ. He was voted as the best defender in college football last year, won the Chuck Bednar Award on the national championship team. He is literally the second most athletic prospect ever, only behind Calvin Johnson. Like, when you can take a chance on that guy, I think it's pretty obvious you have to do that. Now, some people wanted Kyle Hamilton instead, and obviously if the Eagles had stayed at 15, they could have gotten their pick of Davis or Hamilton. Pretty sure Howie had good info that the Ravens wanted Davis. Some people are like, oh, the Eagles didn't even need to trade up because the Ravens wanted Hamilton. I mean, you can blame Howie for a lot of things. You cannot blame him for being like out of touch in terms of what's going on in the market. Like, he has a really good sense of what's going on and value.
Now we're loving Howie. It's an amazing.
I mean, he had a good draft. Well, even last year when I was more critical of him, a lot of people were mad about how the Eagles traded down from 6 because they're like, what if Jamar Chase or Kyle Pitts are there? And I thought that was a fair criticism at the time. But sure enough, I think it was clear that Howie realized that the Bengals were going to take Chase and the Falcons were going to take Pitts, and neither of those players were going to be on the board. So he totally read the room correctly, and I think he did it again here. They got Jordan Davis. I know he wasn't a big time sack producer at Georgia, but like who was? Like Trayvon Walker wasn't. Devontae Wyatt wasn't. That's not how their system works. They're a two-gapping system. They're not trying to just send their defensive linemen flying up the field at the quarterback to rack up sacks. That's not the style of defense that they play. So I think you put him in Philly. I think he's going to be able to be allowed to attack more. I think he's going to get you to 3rd and long and then allow your pass rushers to really tee off with how dominant he's going to be on the interior. And even if he doesn't work out, I mean, like, even if he doesn't maximize his potential, I think he's a high floor, high ceiling kind of prospect. I don't know how he could be bad with the tools in his body and at least his ability to stop the run. I think there's value in that. So I'm really excited about Jordan Davis.
You want my honest thoughts or my like half sarcastic thoughts? Because I'll let you pick. Okay. So I think the Ravens are in so many people's heads. Because I think there's so many people who are convinced, and I'm not saying it's impossible, but like the Ravens are taking it. The Ravens, and I know we all, like I said, like that would be the most Ravens pick of all time, like to just sit there and have Jordan Davis fall to them. And of course, like they sat there and literally everybody else fell to them, because that's just the way the Ravens work. But I will say, on the surface, and like if you go back and you watch or listen to our coverage of the draft, we all were lavishing the Eagles like credit, because I agree, like there's a lot of credit that's due, but I also. Okay, what is the like, the thing in the Death Star, like the one tiny little Achilles heel that can be exposed here? It's that I think that the Eagles maybe they don't care, but they're like forfeiting potential value with things. Like you traded up to draft a player who cannot play on 3rd downs. That's not
true.
But okay, but like in a general sense, like in a philosophical sense, is not going to be the same level of usage to you on 3rd down. But that's fine, right? Like you feel like you can maximize his contribution level like elsewhere in different parts of the game. Okay, like I can get on board that you think that, and it's certainly very possible. Again, I'm not saying it's impossible or stupid, but that's a true data point to consider. We obviously haven't mentioned the trade for A.J. Brown. On the one hand, I really do legitimately acknowledge that Howie and the Eagles have said, you know what? We kind of stink at this. We cannot draft wide receivers. Let's look at the history of Nelson Aguilar and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and Jalen Reagor, who I can't believe is still on the Eagles roster today, by the way, and Devontae Smith, who is the worst of all of them. All right, we are not good at drafting these guys, so let's just like get one that's already good, right? Like let's stop. Let's take the question and the mystery out of this. Let's just pay for a proven commodity. I respect that. On the other hand, I mean, again, I don't like feel you should die on the hill of like, well, I want, because I think Stephen Jones does this a lot. Stephen Jones is like, well, we got to have that 1st round pick because we got to have that 5th-year option. Like we have to have that, and it's important, and it's a definitely an important part of building your team and the finances of a team, et cetera, et cetera. But you completely forfeit that in trading away that pick for AJ Brown, and you pay him right away. And I understand the hit from that comes later a little bit, but that's it's a little bit aggressive, but hang on as I land this plane. I think this is where the Eagles have needed to get back to. Like in my mind, I always associate the Eagles, like when I think about the times where I've been like fearful of the Eagles from a Cowboys perspective, it's when they're willing to like send the house. You know what I mean? It's when they're willing to be aggressive. And I do think that we saw that sort of idea and disposition here. I think the Nakobe Dean pick is an example of being aggressive in its own way. So I feel like it's measured, but it's also aggressive in a way that the Eagles haven't been. Like I feel like the Eagles were really conservative for a while with their draft. This is a dumb way to put it, but this is like a la the Carson Wentz trade. This is, we like these guys. We're going to go up. We're going to get them. We believe in our scouting system, and we know it's going to work. And when they've operated that way, it has generally worked out for them.
I think it's about making bets too. There's never necessarily sure things in the draft. Obviously, there's varying degrees of that. But with Jordan Davis, again, it's just like, this is such a rare kind of player that is not just in any draft. So like, I think at the end of the day, you kind of feel good about making this bet on this kind of player. And then with AJ Brown, like, I think it's overthinking it to think like the contract isn't worth it. I mean, this is like one of the best receivers in the NFL, at least in terms of an efficiency standpoint. RJ, this guy is a guy who ranks.
I know. Michael Kiss loves him, and like
in yards per route run last year, 2nd in yards per route run in 2020 when he was a Pro Bowler, and then 13th as a rookie in 2019. Like, this guy has been extremely efficient. The volume numbers aren't there with some of those other top receivers. Guess why? He's playing in an offense that runs the ball a ton because they have
Wow.
Derrick Henry.
Well, thank God he's coming to the Philadelphia Eagles then.
Well, I agree. That is a problem. I think the Eagles want to pass the ball more, but sure. But that's not him. That's not reflective of his talent as much as just the situation. And I agree. That is certainly something to monitor at least this year. But guess what? A.J. Brown is 24 right now. So he's going to be here for a long time. Is A.J. Brown not the best receiver in the NFC East?
I think there's a strong argument that he is. I mean, it's difficult. Like we talked about that too, like in our coverage. Like, I mean, who's his heaviest competition? Terry McLaurin, maybe CD Lamb. Like if you're generous, you know what I mean? I think CD has potential to take over that mantle, but he hasn't done it yet. And so, which again, like pisses me off that the Cowboys traded away Amari Cooper. I have two final thoughts on this. Well, before we get to Nakobe Dean, the first is, when you mentioned the Titans and the run game, obviously Derrick Henry, I think there are times in years where you kind of are sort of forever linked to a different team when it comes to the draft. And I think about the Cowboys in 2016. They took Zeke in the first round and they took Jalen Smith in the second round. And people have forever said that they could have taken Jalen Ramsey and Miles Jack instead of those two picks. Or, and this is involving another team, they could have taken Jalen Ramsey, and then if you really want a running back, could have taken Derrick Henry. And again, that like I wouldn't even say that's hindsight. Like Derrick Henry was the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. Like he was awesome, whatever. I think that the Eagles like kind of foil here is the Ravens. Like again, I'm not saying the Ravens draft is exactly what the Eagles draft would have been if not for everything that happened, but I do think that you kind of are like there's a wonder back and forth between Baltimore and Philly for a few years based off of these players. I think if Kyle Hamilton develops into a superstar, you're a little bit bummed, but then I think you probably feel like, well, the Eagles were never going to do that. That's how I would feel if I was a Cowboys fan. Like they were never going to draft a safety that high in the first round, whatever.
Literally never taken a first round safety in the franchise history.
The other thing that I was going to add before we get to the Nakobe Dean pick, now I'm really being BLG about this, but so there's a lot of chatter, and I'm not saying this is like the reason, but like, well, you know, Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown worked out together, and Jalen told him, I'm going to talk to the Eagles to get them to trade for you. Even if that's like 10% of the reason, right? Like, and I'm willing to concede that it's possible that Jalen suggested it and the Eagles said, you know, we hadn't thought about that. Let's think about that. And then they like fell in love with the idea. I'm not in love with the idea of doing anything that your franchise quarterback wants that you are not like married to. You know what I mean? Like
quarterback, quote unquote. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you're married to Jalen Hurts, y'all live together, you have a dog and a kid, by all means, like merge the bank accounts, like go all the way in. But this is like, you can't be half in, half out, and then like make a big move like trading for A.J. Brown, which obviously in a vacuum makes sense too. But so like that, like if we think about the long-term future here, okay, part of the reason that A.J. Brown is super excited to be in Philadelphia is because his boy, Jalen Hurts, is the quarterback. You yourself, rightfully, don't think that Jalen Hurts is the future quarterback of this team. How's A.J. Brown going to feel when they give him the boot next year?
I mean, I think it'd be apparent that he would like deserve the boot because I think there's enough.
Wow. Well, then AJ's going to want the boot too. He's going to want to get out.
No.
This is drama. Drama about to unfold, baby.
Eagles didn't acquire A.J. Brown only because of Jalen Hurts. I think it's more than 0%, but I think it's much less than 100% that played a factor. And again, he's only 24. So that's the thing. Like I think with some of these other receivers that were out there who are like, 28, 27, like, and you're signing them to these big money deals, that's just you're not necessarily getting them in their prime, or at least when the quarterback might be, ready to go and be in full form. So I think there's a good chance A.J. Brown outlasts Jalen Hurts here. And I'm pretty sure he'd be understanding of that, again, if the Eagles are at a point where they can't beat good teams like they did last year. They're doing nothing in the playoffs. A.J. Brown, RJ, did say he is not a regular season player. He wants to win, and he wants to win it all.
The most notable players to leave the AFC for the NFC this offseason have been Carson Wentz and A.J. Brown. So, people who hate on the NFC
South
East.
Specifically? Or you said the AFC. You said the AFC. You're talking about just the South?
No. The AFC as a whole. Like, what other star has left the AFC in general for the NFC?
Tyreek. Well, no. Okay. I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. The biggest names
Russell,
are Carson Wentz and A.J. Brown. And they both wind up in the NFC East. So all these people who are like, oh, I call it the NFC least because it's full of bad teams. Well, you watch out. All right. People are coming to play in this mighty division. Last thing before we grade the Eagles, the Nakobe Dean thing. Now, this is for real the last time that I'm going to be BLG. So here we go. I like food. Yeah.
That is such a good impression.
Pizza. Sandwiches, I just say hoagies.
That's just what I do. I just say
Sixers.
The word.
Food.
Everyone's really confused that I'm talking twice at the same time right now.
So being BLG, the Nakobe Dean thing has enormous potential. And I have not combed the comment section at Bleeding Green Nation because I don't want to venture into that toxic sludge. But I would imagine that there are people who are like, we just got the best linebacker in the draft. Like, we got him in the 3rd round, blah, blah, whatever. Very possible. But, and while I understand, like, all these people's, like, caping is, well, Nakobe Dean says that it's a lie, whatever is out there about him. Okay, cool. So, like, we either believe this, and I'm not saying that it's like, it's not true, that maybe Nakobe Dean's just on the wrong end of some coincidences that has happened before. But so we either believe this one person or literally everybody else in the entire NFL. So, and it's a 3rd round pick. So, like, if it doesn't work out, hey, like, not the end of the day. But, and I hope I'm wrong because I want every player to play well and get paid and experience success. I really, truly do. But if I had to bet on what's more likely, it's that the entire rest of the NFL world was correct about what is happening here. And that's why Nakobe Dean lasted as long as he did.
He went at 83. It's totally an acceptable risk, even if he doesn't become anything. So, yeah, I agree with that. But, like, I agree with you. And I've been consistently saying this. You can't just assume. I just hate the assumption that every time a player falls, it's just like everyone's being dumb and this is a steal. Like, that's not how it works. That is sometimes how it works. And, yes, sometimes teams do overthink it. But it's not always the case. Like, there are players
It is more often than not the case. You know what I mean? Like,
they're falling for a reason. And it might not be a good reason, but there's something. There's some reason. It's not like there's no reason.
I hate to be the like person, and like you know how many times do like fans say this, like, you're not the scouts for the team, they get paid to scout, so like let's just trust them. Okay, fine. So I hate to be that person,
so let's just not talk about football.
But like, there are literally professional corporate entities worth billions of dollars who spend full years evaluating this entire process. So to your point, if a player is falling, it is generally for a more than understandable reason.
So we'll see. I mean, Nakobe Dean and Howie Roseman both said that he will be participating in Eagles rookie minicamp this week. That seems like a positive sign. We will be interesting to continue to monitor if he's practicing in OTAs and training camp and everything. If that's all going well, then okay, this looks like there weren't any red flags. But if it's like, well, Nakobe Dean isn't practicing and it's training camp and he's missing a couple weeks, so it's like, okay, then maybe there was something here. Or maybe he practices like 2 practices and all of a sudden he's out for like a couple weeks because, you know, something flared up. You know, like, so I'm very much, this is like, it's file away. It's not that there's necessarily something wrong with him right now, but this is very much like monitor moving forward. And again, maybe it'll be a non-issue. I think it's possible that that's the case. I'm not saying I definitely know that there's something wrong, but Joe Shane, I don't know if you saw this, RJ, said something to the effect of, like, he didn't want to get into why Nakobe Dean was falling because he was asked about, I think, you know, the Giants beat writers are like, why didn't you consider him here? Did you consider him here? Whatever. And he basically said what I just said. Like, there were some things going on with Nakobe, but I don't want to get into that. So it's like, well, what is that? So at the same time that you're hearing that, Howie is saying, oh, he's fine. Oh, like, what the heck? I
think, and you know, tell me if you disagree, I think Joe Shane's the official general manager of the NFC's mixtape. Like,
why?
There was some weird, like, what's his name? Is it Shane? Like, whatever. Like,
we knew it's Shane.
He's impressed us. Like, he's just kind of like, you know, it can't be, you know, Jerry Jones. It can't be Howie Roseman. You know, it's definitely not anybody who's ever been associated with Washington. Like Joe Shane, you know what I mean? Like, if we got to have one.
Well, they are your Giants. You think they're going to win the NFC?
All right, let's talk about my Cowboys. So they made 9 picks. Everybody said there's no way the Cowboys are going to pick all 9 times. They're going to move one of their 4 fifth-round picks. Nope. Cowboys did not trade up. The Cowboys have not traded up in 2 drafts. In fact, the last time they did, it was with the Philadelphia Eagles for Tyler Biadasz. They took a different Tyler who also plays offensive line in the first round at 24 overall, Tyler Smith out of the mighty program that is Tulsa. I don't know if you saw my tweets about this, Brandon, but you will see that the Cowboys second round pick is noted as D. Williams. Sam Williams joined our draft day coverage on Saturday, and we interviewed him about his obviously excitement to join the Cowboys. And he actually specifically told us that he wants Cowboys fans to refer to him as D. Williams. His middle name is DeGarrick, and it's spelled DeGarrick. So he said he's gone by D, like among family and friends, like his whole life. So he wants to go back.
Defensive end.
That was also a joke, obviously.
I don't like that. It's very confusing. Like I'm looking at the screen right now, and
if you think it's confusing now, when he joined the show that day, it was the same platform that we used to put this show together, and so you've got like your name down there. He spelled it there DEE. So the only reason I know that it's spelled this way is I asked him. I said, so like people are gonna tweet at you and stuff, like how do you want it spelled? And I assumed it was the DE, and he said no, it's DE because it's from DeCarrick. So it was
he spelled his own name wrong.
Very, very confusing situation. Jalen Tolbert is, I think, most Cowboys fans' favorite pick to end day 2. It was a lot of fun. Jake Ferguson, tight end out of Wisconsin. Charlie Kohler was somebody who we wanted. Literally went the pick right before to the Baltimore Ravens. Matt, well, let's go.
I like that pick for the Cowboys.
Athletic prospect. Maybe going to take some time to develop, but super freak of a human. Deron Bland, interesting corner prospect, but
kind
again,
of a boring pick, if we're being honest.
There we go. Nice job by VLG.
That
Damon Clark is the Cowboys version of Nakobe Dean. Had the spinal fusion surgery. A lot of people anticipate it'll be a bit of a redshirt year for him. Of course, the Cowboys are saying he could definitely play in 2022 because that's what all NFL teams say right now. But I do like the long game there because, and this is something that we unpacked, but if Damon Clark is able to be a legitimate NFL player, but that can't happen until 2023, okay, great. Well, Leighton Vander Esch is on a 1-year deal. So I think the Cowboys have kind of covered their bases for the future. We'll see if it works out, but they at least have a plan. All told, I think they, relative to consensus boards, and this is something I've said a lot, reached on their first 2 picks. Again, the 3rd pick was awesome. It never made sense that the receivers were really going to fall to them in the first round. But, Brandon, a lot of people have given the Cowboys credit for addressing their needs at guard, at defensive end, and at wide receiver. Never mind the fact that these needs were literally all created by the team this offseason.
The Cowboys drafted 3 players whose name begins with J and 4 players who begin with D. So that's my.
They also drafted Tyler Smith to play along their offensive line. They already have Tyron Smith. They already have Tyler Biadasz, and they also have Terrence Steele, whose initials are the same.
So is Tyler Smith's jersey going to say Ty. Smith? Because
it can't, because Tyron Smith. Yeah. A lot of people think that he's going to be TYL and Tyron will just be,
that's kind of gross, honestly. TYL. That doesn't. I don't love that look. Till Smith. I think it was a reach. I think it was clearly a reach. It doesn't mean he can't be a good player, and he's one of the youngest players in the draft, if I'm not mistaken. He's only like 20 years old, I believe. That whole thing about how they had to like break his legs to like reconstruct him and everything, like that's interesting. Like maybe
I will say this, he has said all of the right things. Like, I mean, this, like not every prospect comes in and is someone who you can like gravitate to from a personality standpoint. He is awesome and he's super young. I literally just turned 21 last month. And so there's a lot of potential. Like I really think a lot to work with, but that doesn't, kind of jive with their whole like, hey, you're in a spot where you can win now sort of thing.
I also think it's a little overrated how like there's talk like he can replace Tyron Smith. It seems like a lot of people really think he'd be better off at guard in the NFL. So, and honestly,
well, that's where he's going to play to start, obviously.
Right.
But
the pick here should have been another Tyler, and it should have been Tyler.
Oh, dude. Well, they didn't. I mean, so I don't know if you saw this. I don't know if you saw this. We had an article go out at bloggingtheboys.com that noted that the Eagles actually drafted more of the Cowboys 30 visits than the Cowboys did.
See that.
And so, but somebody who was not among the Cowboys 30 visits was Tyler Linderbaum, the center who went to the Ravens.
I mean, I just think they're like Biadasz isn't any good, man. Like he's like you can.
He's fine. Like I do think
you can win with him, but he's not definitely a strength of the team. You're not winning because of him. And I mean, not to say like you win because of your center, but the point is he's not a strength. He's fine. He's just a guy, probably. But like you could have had someone who I think offers a lot more than that. And I think what the Cowboys did here is kind of be like, okay, we don't need to upgrade at center because he's fine enough, but we do need to upgrade at guard. And I think that's kind of how you make mistakes in the draft, because if you're taking the best player available, or at least something closer to that, I think that's how you end up with Linderbaum instead. And I don't think the Cowboys did that. I would have been, honestly, genuinely, I would have been much more annoyed if the Cowboys took Linderbaum than they took Tyler Smith.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It was, there was a lot of chatter coming around that this was going to be the pick even as early as Wednesday. A lot of people were kind of freaking out. A lot of Cowboys people like, oh no, please, please, please. And sure enough, it wound up being that. It's objectively a reach, and that like I think, and you run into this too, like people hear that and they're like, well, quit hating. And like the most frustrating thing, and I've said this a lot, but is people, I've gotten this same comment in just packaged in different wording several times in the last week. I remember people being mad about the Travis Frederick pick too, and look how that worked out. Yeah, cool. That's true. Like it's almost as if you could find an example to prove every case in NFL history. So it's a difficult draft to understand, especially because the Cowboys put all of their eggs into this. And that's what I meant about like applauding the aggressiveness of the Eagles. Like that to me, that's why I still kind of don't understand the like aggression from the Eagles. Like obviously the division's winnable for them, but like if you're the Cowboys and you made these moves that like showed like, okay, we knew that like we were going to go all in the draft and we were going to come away with like some awesome players, then fine. I would have sat here and said, okay, you know what, you did it and good for you. And I was wrong and I'll eat this crow. But like the draft lends to the idea that they're like kind of, slow rolling this and playing for the future. So a popular thing to say is I bet Sean Payton likes Tyler Smith a lot.
I'll give the Eagles an A- for their draft.
Me too. And I'll give the Cowboys I've given them a B- every time I've done a grade. Just because I do think they're talented players, but I do think that they were some sort of reaches. I'm going to show you this on our screen so our YouTube audience can see it. This graphic has been tweeted around by a lot of Cowboys fans who are like convinced that the Cowboys are smarter than the rest of the NFL. It's going to cover our faces right now, Brandon.
It's just the graphic that says RJ loves the Eagles. I don't know why he would put that up on the screen right now.
Can you please read it, BLG, because the YouTube audience knows that you're lying.
It's a graphic of Sam Williams and Aiden Hutchinson.
D. Williams.
Well, I mean, the graphic says Sam Williams, so I'm reading what the graphic said. You asked me to read what it said, so I did. And it's trying to compare the players together, which these things are always stupid because
people have been tweeting this out, and this like when you compare them, it notes that in fewer games, D. Williams had 2 less tackles, a half less sack,
tackles,
1 half fewer sacks, 2 more forced fumbles, did score a touchdown, and had 1 half fewer tackle for loss. Yeah. So this is like people's trump card, like, boom, the Cowboys roasted the NFL.
You know how we hate on like the graphics of like, imagine stopping this offense. And it's
that existed. You sent me one over the weekend.
Well, that one was actually unironic and was true, but it's with players who are clearly not any good. Like, I don't know, let's say like Drew Lock and, Kenneth Walker, who actually
but so a few weeks ago, I don't know if you know this, Stephen Jones was on the radio.
I wasn't done with my point. I'm saying like that graphic, people also love to do this with just any players. Like people do that with Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson. They're like, actually, Hurts is comparable to Lamar Jackson.
That like we talked about that. Like I remember after week 1 last year, there was something like I've mentioned this 1,000 times. Like there was like a Score Center or Sports Center app or not app graphic that was like, in his first 8 games, Hurts had like whatever it was, like average like 300 yards or something a game, and that was more than Lamar Jackson. Right. So he's better. Steven, but like it's troubling when like, whatever, sports accounts do this for likes and retweets, whatever, like we're on the same business, fine. Stephen Jones a few weeks ago said that Dorrance Armstrong was right up there with Randy Gregory as far as production last year because they had similar sack numbers. So it's a little bit troubling that would exist. But the Jalen Tolbert pick could work out. You could be a star. The Damon Clark thing's a lottery ticket. It's a better value, if so, than even Nakobe Dean because you got him in the 5th round versus the 3rd round. Some legitimate talent and potential like Matt Waletzko and Deron Bland, whatever. But yeah, B- for me.
Any undrafted rookie free agents of interest for the Cowboys or other teams that you saw?
Jonathan Garibay is the Dallas Cowboys' new kicker. He's, in fact, the only kicker on the roster. Out of Texas Tech, was pretty accurate last year, and by some measurements, better than Cameron Dicker, who is more often referred to as Dicker the Kicker. But Dicker the Kicker went to the University of Texas, so there's a lot of crossover Cowboys fans there that wanted him. Jonathan Garibay only went to Texas Tech, so, hey. But he's the big one, I think. He's the largest likelihood to make the roster because the Cowboys need a kicker right now.
So for the Eagles, they have a lot of issues, I would say, in the secondary still. They didn't draft any cornerbacks or safeties and have needs there. They weren't able to sign the Honey Badger, which I never really was counting on that, but the Saints got him. Kind of a double whammy for the Eagles, too. The Saints, obviously, or the Eagles owning the Saints' first-round pick next year makes New Orleans a little bit better, although I still think they're entirely delusional about what they're doing. But anyway, the one to watch for, or one of the top ones, I should say, for the Eagles, beyond the defensive
Carson
backs.
Strong, new QB1.
opposite of the Washington quarterback, Carson Strong, as opposed to Carson Week. I think that's a little interesting. A lot of people thought he could have been drafted like a fourth round, fifth round kind of pick. Mm-hmm. It's just that it seems like his knees might be shot, so maybe it's kind of DOA and he just can't play anymore because no one took him. So we'll see about that one. I think that one is worth keeping an eye on. That he wanted to sign here, right? Because like the undrafted rookie free agents sounds obvious, but they get a choice, and ideally you want to go to a team where you can envision a path. And right now, the Eagles already have 3 quarterbacks on their roster, and it's possible they trade Minshew or whatever, and he's a free agent after this year. And Reed Sinnett is not exactly like it's roster spot is carved in stone or anything, but it is interesting that Carson Strong saw some kind of opportunity here.
I would add that who was the UDFA that chose to back out of the Eagles?
EJ Perry, from Brown.
So he's like, hey, Carson's got this job locked up. Like, I don't want to go there. I don't want to compete with that opportunity. Right. So that's interesting.
And that they wanted to, and that they were like interested in adding 2 quarterbacks. Like, I think that's not like they're going to come for Jalen Hurts' job, but it does.
AJ Brown's pissed off, man. He's already pissed off. Like, why are you coming from my guy, Jalen Hurts?
I think it speaks to like some lack of, like long-term security.
Bold prediction, not so bold. AJ Brown is going to join Nick Caserio in wearing like Jalen Hurts t-shirts. That will happen at some point this offseason.
Why is Caserio wearing Jalen Hurts t-shirts?
He wore one last year. Remember, he wore like a Hurts t-shirt.
Caserio, the Texans GM.
Oh my gosh, what am I saying?
Yeah, I was like, that's why I was like, I have no idea where you're going with this.
I forgot my man's name, Nick Sirianni.
Okay.
Nick Sirianni, like AJ Brown and Nick Sirianni are going to be wearing t-shirts. Maybe, Nick Caserio, like, have you seen like he wears a lot of vests? That's like his thing. Like anytime he's wearing like it's not like a button-up vest. It's like an athletic vest, like a zip-up, like a golf vest or something. So
I think those are all Ohio area kind of guys. Like I think they might have went to the same college.
All guys named Nick too. So
Also both Italian. I don't know.
I can't speak to that. But anyway, okay. Fantastic edition of the NFC East mixtape.
Wow.
Brandon, do you have anything else left to say?
Eagles are going to win the NFC East this year.
I disagree because the Giants are. Anyway, Brandon,
Don't believe that.
The last words, however many you want, belong to you. Pizza, food. I like food, pizza. Yeah.
I mean, that was a good impersonation once again. Not as good as your Russell Wilson impersonation, but
Brandon, it's just I know I've been hearing that you like food, man, and we all like food. I mean, it's like like when I'm training, I gotta eat. And I get starving because I'm burning.
And what do you eat, Russ?
800,
what do you like to
calories.
eat these days?
Well, I have a world-class gourmet chef, and so I'm on a strict. It's sometimes it's carbohydrates, sometimes it's not.
Yeah, but what if you're out and you need to get something from somewhere? Like a sandwich.
Well, my body's a temple, and I got to be very, very, very careful with what I put into it.
So you never get Subway then. Even though you were at the Super Bowl promoting that and signing sandwiches with an edible.
Brandon, I'm not at liberty to speak to my contractual agreements with anybody, but if I'm out and about, if I could find a nice piece of salmon, that's because again, I'm all about energy, and when you put positive energy into your body, you can release positive energy into the world, and that's what I'm here to do. That's my mission.
You gave a shout out to Iowa, I believe, on the end of Monday, Football Monday.
The state of Iowa.
Just the state of Iowa. Let's give out a shout out to another state. Let's pick one here. It can't be where either of us live. I think that would not be fun. I think we should pick a random state.
You wanna look or give a shout out to a state within the United States.
This state is the official state of the NFC mixtape, at least today. For today only.
Oh, I like this. It's a rotational sort of thing. Like it's like an honor to be the state. I think the first one should be a state that neither of us have been to.
Wyoming.
I've never been there, but so that's one consideration. I've never.
I want to pick somewhere where we hopefully have listeners, but like not too many, because then they'll feel really special for being from there.
I don't think Wyoming's going to work. I think that's unlikely.
We might have none there. More
again, like
people, I think.
This is the NFC East mixtape, and you went west. I mean, so
that's fine.
How about Maine? Like hanging up there in the top corner. I don't think Maine gets enough credit. Like they got to hold it down. You know what I mean? Like, they're protecting from intrusion up there.
You like lobsters?
I love lobsters.
Okay, then you like Maine.
All right, BLG. The last words. Say something beautiful about the official state of the NFC East mixtape. Maine.
There's really nice fog up there, from what I've heard of. The fog rolls in. It's scenic. It's beautiful. Check out the SB Nation NFL show. Rate, review, subscribe. Tell a friend about that, and tell a friend about this podcast you listen to here. Everyone was looking forward to this episode, RJ. I hope it delivered. I hope you're really coming to grips with how the Eagles are going to win the division this year. So it's a great time for all.
The Eagles almost drafted me in 2012. Thank God they did, because, go Hawks and Broncos country. That's right.